Before I purchased my very first rental property, I ran a lot of analysis. And on the spreadsheets, this property looked amazing. But then over the next 2 years, I lost $15,000 in negative cash flow. What I learned was this was a Class D property. What I learned was a lot of very hard lessons. Specifically, these are the 7 things I wish I knew then. I'm gonna share with you so that you don't have to make the same mistakes. Guys, these 7 lessons come from a guy who has to learn things the hard way. The truth is, that's just how I'm hardwired. Even when I was a Marine Corps helicopter pilot, I had to have lessons beat into me, literally by my instructors. There's a lot of folks out there that can attest to that. And today, I still learn lessons the hard way. But the hardest lessons I learned were on my first 2 properties. The first one was a long-distance investment, a duplex in Huntsville, Alabama. My second one was a house hack, a 4-plex here in College Station. I'm gonna share with you those 7 hard-learned lessons so that you don't have to make the same mistakes, hopefully saving you time, headache, and of course money. So let's jump into that first lesson. The first lesson learned the hard way is that my analysis and my spreadsheets can straight up lie to me, especially if I don't understand the inputs that are required. In this case, I didn't realize that I need to increase my expenses because I was in a rough part of town, a rough neighborhood, a D neighborhood, if you will. If you're not familiar, neighborhoods and asset classes are broken down to A, B, C, and D. As you can imagine, A is the best, and D, well, that's usually considered a war zone. And I was in a rough neighborhood. As a result, I had additional expenses that I wasn't accounting for. Higher vacancy, properties that sat longer, vacant longer, and then more expensive make-readies. When my tenants moved out, they left it in a horrible condition, which is a very difficult property to manage. Plus I had late fees all the time, tenants that couldn't pay. It just was not a great situation. I didn't put that into my spreadsheet and ultimately lost $15,000, which rolls me into my second lesson learned. I learned how to identify a D neighborhood. And now this is Greg's rule of thumb on where I invest and where I don't invest and what I consider a D neighborhood. I want you to make your own determinations on this, but our rule of thumb is as follows. If I'm not comfortable sending my wife to the property at night, or said another way, if I'm not comfortable living there with my family, I don't invest there. I have no problem living in most neighborhoods, but if it's a place where I don't feel safe, I don't invest there because presumably I'm gonna face higher turnovers, higher vacancies, and more expensive turn costs. The third lesson that I learned the hard way was that you have to understand the neighborhoods within the town you're investing in. This is particularly important if you're investing at a distance like I was, living in North Carolina, investing in Huntsville, Alabama. I understood the fundamentals, the economics behind the city, which were very strong, and I ran analysis on the property, which looked strong, but what I skipped was the step in the middle, understanding the neighborhood. Where do people want to live? Where are they avoiding? Where's the path of progress? Ultimately, I ended up investing in a neighborhood that I didn't understand and otherwise wasn't a great place to invest, particularly when it comes to cash flow. This burned me so bad that I have since brought that with me and implemented this as a tool for our long-distance investors here in Bryan-College Station through the Schwartz Realty Group. We now recommend that long-distance investors visit us before ever looking at properties specifically just to drive neighborhoods so that we can show them in person where the path of progress is. In person, we can show you which neighborhoods are up and coming and which might be decaying. Ultimately, that is a huge step that I skipped, and I think that might have been the one thing that could have saved me $15,000. If you're within 90 days of buying your next property here in Bryan-College Station and you want to set up a strategy call so that you can avoid these 7 mistakes, down in the description below is a link to my calendar. Book a call with me or shoot me an email. We'll get set up and get you pointed the right direction. If you're more than 90 days out, the best thing you can do is subscribe to this channel and subscribe to our newsletter. I'll have a link to that also in the description below. The fourth lesson I had to learn not once, but twice, and that is that vacancies are the silent killer. In fact, vacancies are my #1 enemy as a buy and hold landlord. When I was in Huntsville, Alabama, I was in a rough part of town. So when a tenant decided to move out, it took us 4 months or more to fill that vacancy because who would want to live in a rough part of town in a rougher house? Then when I moved here to Bryan-College Station, I bought a 4-plex, supposed to have 2 paying tenants in it. Well, they weren't well screened. I didn't realize this, and both those tenants over the next few months ended up skipping on me. Unexpected vacancies cost me money. Vacancies are very expensive, and you want to make sure you account for those in your analysis. The 5th lesson that I learned is that property management does not equal asset management. Shit, I didn't even know what asset management meant. Now I do. Let me explain it to you real quick. As simply as I can explain it, property managers manage the property and the tenants, collect rent, respond to maintenance requests, fill vacancies, that kind of thing. Your asset manager is responsible for the performance of the property, which means managing the property manager, making tough decisions about upgrades. Should we upgrade the kitchen to drive rents? And then also just overall ensuring that the property is performing based on the analysis that you did from the beginning. Now I assumed, like a lot of people do, that when you hire a property manager, that they will be doing the asset management, but that's generally not their job. As a landlord, it's your job. So when my property didn't perform, I was pointing fingers at the property manager, and I should have been pointing fingers at myself. The lesson learned is that even if you hire out property management, you still need to stay involved in your property and its performance. The sixth lesson that I learned the hard way that I now implement with every single property, and that I wish I knew back then, is to track key performance indicators or KPIs during a vacancy. KPIs are simply data points that help you make smart decisions. And in this case, when we have a vacancy, we have some tough decisions we got to make about adjusting prices, providing incentives, or upgrading the unit. So I recommend that you track the following numbers and do so on a weekly basis. Number one, you want to know how many views that property got. Number of views on Zillow is usually sufficient. Number two, you want to know how many total inquiries that property got over the last week. This means how many people emailed, called, sent a Facebook Marketplace request, or made a request through Zillow. Then you want to know how many showings the property got, and of course you want to get feedback from those showings. And then lastly, I track my competition. I want to know how many active competitive rental properties are listed for lease, and then I want to know how many of those were leased in the last week. This gives me an idea of where we are positioned to our competition and the absorption rate to see how long I will possibly be sitting vacant. These numbers should allow you to make smart decisions because, of course, as mentioned, you are the asset manager and you are in large part responsible for minimizing that vacancy. The seventh lesson learned the hard way is that due diligence occurs not just on the property through an inspection, but also on the leases and the tenants. Guys, in Texas and in most other states, when you buy a property, you inherit the tenants, the leases, and the terms of the lease. So you better understand what you're getting. This could either be an asset or a liability, meaning that if that tenant wasn't well screened and they skip on you, like happened to me with my fourplex, you are basically taking on risk and a liability, and the price should reflect you should renegotiate as appropriate. What I recommend is that you get three things. Number one, most importantly, make sure you get your hands on the lease and take your time reviewing the terms of that lease because you're also agreeing to all of those terms. Number two, ask for the tenant ledger. See if that tenant has been paying on time, if they've been assessed any fees, late fees, damages, things like that. And number three, try to get your hands on either the tenant's application or at least understand their screening criteria. In my case, when I bought that fourplex, those tenants weren't screened at all. And well, it made sense why they skipped on me. They weren't great tenants. So now we do due diligence as appropriate. Guys, ultimately, I keep learning lessons the hard way every single day. And I share those lessons with you on this channel. So if you're trying to grow your wealth through real estate, you need to hit the subscribe button. And if you want to help me out, hit that like button because that really keeps me motivated to do another video every single week. And then if you do nothing else, literally nothing else, until next week when I drop that next video, you take it easy.